Clara adjusted her mask and took a deep breath as she stepped into the pediatric wing of St. Vincent's Hospital. Despite the holiday decorations dotting the walls, half-hearted garlands, and a few faded ornaments, the air was heavy, weighted by silence and the absence of life that Clara had come to expect from night shifts. She tugged her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The cold seemed to linger in the hospital halls, as though the chill itself sensed the emptiness. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her family, gathered around a cozy fireplace, probably sipping hot chocolate and opening presents. But tonight, Clara was here, in this near-deserted hospital wing, where most of staff had taken the night off, leaving just a skeleton crew behind. She didn't mind the quiet usually, but tonight, something felt different, an almost unnatural calm that made her uneasy. As she approached the nursing station, Clara noticed a name she hadn't seen before on her patient list: Lucas Morrow, a 9-year-old boy admitted just hours ago. According to the records, Lucas had been admitted due to complications related to a rare neurological disorder. He was blind, alone for the holidays, and from what she could see, struggling with symptoms the doctors hadn't fully explained. She peered into his room as she passed. The dim light revealed a small figure lying motionless under a thick blanket. He looked peaceful enough, but something about the stillness of the room made her pause. "Hey, Clara," a voice interrupted her thoughts. Anna, a new intern with bright, eager eyes, was already checking in on another patient. Clara gave her a warm smile, admiring Anna's determination despite the long hours. "Busy night?" Clara asked as she glanced down the hallway. "Quiet, actually." "Too quiet," Anna replied, a hint of nerves in her voice. "Lucas in room 206. Strange case." "I've heard Dr. Weaver's been keeping a close eye on his treatment." Clara nodded thoughtfully. Dr. Weaver, the head physician on duty, was known for his charm, but Clara couldn't shake an odd feeling about him. He'd been around for years, but there were rumors, things she dismissed as gossip, but never quite forgotten. After finishing her rounds, Clara decided to take a closer look at Lucas's records. His prescription caught her attention, an unusually high dose of a particular medication she knew well. It seemed excessive, even for a child with his condition. Doubts flickered in her mind, but she shook her head. It was probably nothing. After all, Dr. Weaver was an experienced physician. Still, something didn't sit right with her, and as she checked the charts again, a chill ran down her spine. Later that night, Clara returned to Lucas's room. The boy had been given his medication earlier, but now he seemed restless. His breathing was labored, and a faint sweat glistened on his forehead despite the room's chill. "Lucas," she whispered, gently placing her hand on his shoulder. He flinched slightly, and Clara withdrew her hand, heart sinking. Lucas stirred, muttering something incoherent under his breath. She leaned in closer, catching fragments of his murmurs. The words made little sense, but they sent a jolt of worry through her. Clara decided to check his vitals again, just in case. His pulse was elevated, and his temperature had spiked. These weren't typical side effects, and she felt the prickling sensation of something deeply wrong. As she reviewed his records, her suspicions grew. The high dose she'd noticed earlier didn't seem to align with Lucas's symptoms. Clara's mind raced. She needed a second opinion, someone who could confirm what she was seeing. She found Anna in the break room, flipping through a medical textbook, eyes bright with concentration. "Anna, can I borrow you for a minute?" Clara asked, keeping her voice low. Anna followed her to Lucas's room. Clara explained the situation, and Anna's brow furrowed as she checked the boy's vitals herself. "I see what you mean," Anna whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the machines. "Something doesn't add up. I know Dr. Weaver's experienced, but this dosage feels wrong. We should report it," Clara said, struggling to keep her voice steady. Anna hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if someone might be listening. "Do you think Dr. Weaver would overlook something like this? He's got such a reputation." Clara nodded but didn't answer. She knew Anna was trying to give Dr. Weaver the benefit of the doubt, but her own instincts were screaming at her that this was more than an oversight. Determined to find answers, Clara slipped back to the nursing station and reviewed Lucas's file more carefully, looking for anything she'd missed. A nagging thought crept into her mind, something about the recent cases that had come in during the holidays. She heard whispers about odd symptoms among patients and records being quietly adjusted, but she had brushed it off as staff gossip. Now, she wasn't so sure. Anna's words echoed in her mind as she closed the file. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something much larger than a simple misdiagnosis. Clara's suspicion gnawed at her, and though she trusted her instincts, she felt the weight of going against someone like Dr. Weaver. He was respected, charming, and well-established. But there was a quiet voice in her mind that wouldn't let her forget the strange dosage and Lucas's worsening condition. She needed help, someone she could trust. The next morning, Clara found Anna in the break room, visibly tired, but still flipping through her medical notes. Clara approached her, keeping her voice low. "Anna, I can't shake this feeling that something's wrong with Lucas's treatment. His reaction last night was normal. That dosage isn't right for a child like him." Anna paused, her brow furrowing. "I noticed something, too. I wanted to ask Dr. Weaver, but, well, I'm still new here. I didn't want to question his judgment." Clara sighed, understanding Anna's hesitation. Dr. Weaver's influence was intimidating, and most wouldn't think twice about questioning him. "I know how it feels, but as nurses, it's our job to protect our patients. If you've seen anything strange, anything that doesn't sit right, I'd appreciate your help." Anna hesitated, but Clara could see her resolve strengthening. "Okay," Anna said finally, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "There might be some old patient records we can check for patterns. Maybe this isn't the first case of unusual dosing." The two women made their way to the records room, where they found stacks of dusty patient files from previous years. Anna sorted through them, pulling out files of cases from previous Decembers. They worked in silence, each record adding a layer of dread. They stumbled upon several cases, patients admitted during the holiday season who had similar unusual doses prescribed. In each file, the treatment notes were brief and vague, almost as if someone had tried to bury the details. Clara's heartbeat quickened. This wasn't just an oversight. It was deliberate. Anna looked up at her, wide-eyed. "Clara, this is serious. If Dr. Weaver is involved in something, maybe we're putting ourselves at risk." Clara nodded, her mind racing. They had unearthed something sinister, but what could they do about it? They couldn't report Dr. Weaver without undeniable proof. She placed a reassuring hand on Anna's shoulder. "We'll keep this between us for now, but if we see any more red flags, we'll need to act." That night, Clara returned to Lucas's room, heart pounding with anticipation. Lucas was asleep, his breath shallow and uneven, which only deepened her concern. She lingered a moment, watching over him. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed movement at the end of the hall. She recognized Dr. Weaver's silhouette, tall and confident, as he spoke quietly to another nurse. Clara slipped out of Lucas's room, moving closer to listen, though she remained hidden. She caught snippets of their conversation, the words tinged with an unsettling edge. "Need to be careful," Dr. Weaver murmured. "Last year's incident nearly compromised everything. Make sure no one's looking too closely at his chart." Clara's stomach twisted. Was he talking about Lucas? The mention of last year only added to her suspicions. She held her breath, listening intently. The nurse nodded. "Understood, Dr. Weaver. The records are updated, but there's a new nurse on staff, Clara. She's been looking at the charts a little too closely." Clara's heart hammered. She pressed herself against the wall, praying she wouldn't be discovered. Dr. Weaver's response was a low murmur, but his words carried a warning tone. "Then keep an eye on her. We can't afford any loose ends this time." As they walked away, Clara slipped back into Lucas's room, heart pounding and mind reeling. She had seen enough. This was a cover-up, deliberate and calculated. Dr. Weaver was hiding something dangerous, and now she was a target for looking too closely. Back at the nurse's station, Clara found Anna. She pulled her aside, quickly recounting the conversation she had overheard. Anna's eyes widened, fear shadowing her face. What are we going to do? Anna whispered, glancing around nervously. Clara took a steadying breath. We need proof. Something that shows he's been altering records, specifically with Lucas. If we can catch him in the act, we might be able to put an end to this. Anna's face was pale, but she nodded, a flicker of determination in her eyes. Together, they made a pact to watch Dr. Weaver closely, documenting everything they could without drawing attention. For the rest of the shift, Clara's nerves were on edge. Every time she saw Dr. Weaver, she felt his gaze linger a little too long, as if he knew she was watching him. The tension between them grew, an unspoken battle of wills, and Clara braced herself for what would come next. The next day, Clara woke up early with a sense of dread that lingered from the previous night. She kept thinking about the files, Dr. Weaver's warning, and the dangerous position she was putting herself in. But Lucas's health, and possibly the health of many other vulnerable patients, depended on her following through. At the hospital, she and Anna agreed to meet during their break to investigate the pharmacy records. Clara's hands trembled as she used her badge to access the restricted area, the small scanner beeping softly in the otherwise silent hall. Anna kept watch as Clara quietly slipped inside, her heart pounding as she opened the drawers of patient files. She sifted through the charts, meticulously searching for Lucas's file. Finally, she found it, and her breath caught. Clara flipped through the pages, each detail carefully noted until she reached the most recent entries. The dosage section for Lucas's medication had been altered, with the original prescription crossed out and a higher dose scribbled in by hand. Her mind raced. Someone had intentionally raised his medication. Just as she took a photo of the file with her phone, she heard footsteps in the hallway. She froze, motioning to Anna, who quickly ducked around the corner to avoid being seen. Clara could barely breathe as she listened to the soft shuffle of feet. But then, the sound faded, and she exhaled, glancing at Anna with relief. They escaped the records room and retreated to the break area, where Clara reviewed the photos. She felt sick. This was the evidence they needed, but exposing it would put them both in serious trouble. Anna seemed to sense her thoughts, her face ashen. Clara, if we get caught, we could lose our licenses, Anna whispered, her voice trembling. Clara took a steadying breath. I know, but we can't let him keep doing this. I think he's been doing it for years. We're talking about children's lives. Anna nodded, though fear still shadowed her eyes. They agreed to lay low for a day or two, continuing to observe Dr. Weaver's behavior and look for more evidence if possible. But Clara's resolve had hardened. She couldn't walk away from this, not when innocent lives were at risk. Clara's determination wavered as the day wore on, and she began to feel the weight of her decision. It was one thing to suspect something was wrong. It was another to openly challenge someone as respected as Dr. Weaver. She knew that going against him could cost her everything. Later that evening, Dr. Weaver approached her, his smile warm and practiced, but his eyes sharp. Clara steeled herself, hiding her nervousness behind a mask of professionalism. Clara, I wanted to talk to you, he began, his voice almost too friendly. I've noticed you've been taking a keen interest in the charts lately. That's good. Shows initiative. But we have protocols for a reason. Clara's stomach twisted, but she managed to keep her tone even. Of course, Dr. Weaver. I just want to ensure the patients are receiving the best care. He chuckled, though there was no warmth in it. That's exactly why we have seasoned professionals overseeing everything. Sometimes, newcomers can become overly enthusiastic, misinterpreting things that are better left to those with more experience. The threat in his words was clear, and Clara's heart raced. But she didn't let her fear show. Understood, Doctor. I'll keep that in mind. Dr. Weaver nodded, the faintest smile tugging at his lips as he walked away. Clara felt the weight of his words settling over her like a dark cloud. He knew she was watching him, and he wanted her to stop. When her shift ended, she met Anna in the staff lounge, her hands still trembling. She recounted the conversation, and Anna's face went pale. He knows, Anna said, her voice a whisper. What are we going to do? Clara stared at the ground, feeling the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She could sense Dr. Weaver's influence all around them, in the way some staff members gave her strange looks, or in how they avoided her gaze. The walls seemed to close in around her, amplifying her isolation. But then she thought of Lucas, lying helpless in his bed, and every other child who had unknowingly become a victim of Dr. Weaver's reckless care. She clenched her fists, her resolve strengthening. "We keep going," Clara said firmly. "If he thinks he can intimidate us, he's wrong. We'll find a way to expose him." Anna looked at her, a flicker of fear replaced by admiration. They both knew the risks, but for the sake of their patients, they couldn't back down now. Clara returned to Lucas's room the next morning, her heart heavy with worry. The boy's condition seemed to be deteriorating. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale and clammy, and he barely stirred when she spoke his name. "Lucas," she whispered, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. His eyelids fluttered, but he didn't respond. She carefully adjusted his blanket, the sight of him tugging at her heart. He seemed so small, so vulnerable, lying there with only the machines around him as a lifeline. Clara checked his vitals, noting that his heart rate was lower than it had been. The realization that this might be Dr. Weaver's doing filled her with a quiet, seething anger. The thought of someone deliberately harming a child to cover up mistakes, or worse, to maintain a reputation, made her stomach turn. The sound of footsteps behind her pulled her from her thoughts. Dr. Weaver entered the room, his expression impassive as he glanced at Lucas, then at Clara. His calm demeanor felt like an insult to the suffering child lying between them. "How's our patient this morning?" he asked smoothly, as if they were discussing something trivial. Clara kept her tone as neutral as she could manage. "He's stable, but he hasn't improved. I'm concerned about his reaction to the medication." Dr. Weaver's eyes flickered, and for a split second, she thought she saw a hint of annoyance. But he quickly masked it with a reassuring smile. "Trust the process, Clara. Sometimes these cases take time to show improvement. There's no need to worry." Clara clenched her fists, barely holding back her frustration. His dismissive tone felt like a slap, and she could feel her anger bubbling beneath the surface. But she kept her composure, knowing any hint of resistance would make him more suspicious. As Dr. Weaver left the room, Clara's mind raced. She couldn't stand by and watch Lucas suffer without acting. He needed help, and it was clear that she couldn't rely on anyone higher up in the hospital hierarchy to intervene. She knew she would have to find another way. Later, she found Anna in the break room and told her about Lucas's worsening condition. Anna's eyes reflected her own anger and sadness. "This is wrong," Anna whispered, her voice tight with emotion. "He's just a child. He doesn't deserve this." Clara placed a hand on her friend's shoulder. "I know, Anna. We need to get more proof. We have to show everyone what he's doing, and we need to do it before Lucas gets worse." They agreed to monitor Lucas closely, taking notes and photos whenever possible to document his condition. Clara hoped that by gathering more evidence, they could expose Dr. Weaver's actions once and for all. A few days passed, and with each shift, Clara noticed Lucas slipping further into a weakened state. She and Anna had been vigilant, documenting every change, every unusual symptom, but Clara felt like time was running out. Her frustration and fear grew as she watched Lucas struggle, and the lack of response from the administration made her feel as if she were trapped in a nightmare. One evening, as Clara was taking a break in the empty lounge, Anna rushed in, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. She held a stack of papers tightly in her grip. "Clara, I found something," Anna whispered, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. "I've been digging into Dr. Weaver's past, and I found records from other hospitals. Similar cases, similar patients, children. Some didn't make it." Clara's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Dr. Weaver worked at several hospitals before coming here," Anna explained, unfolding the documents. "And each time, there was a pattern. Patients in the pediatric ward who developed unexpected complications. Many of them were under his care, and each time, he left the hospital soon after the incidents." Clara sifted through the records, her heart pounding. The dates, the names, they all painted a chilling picture. It wasn't just Lucas. Dr. Weaver had a history of questionable practices that had gone unnoticed, or, worse, had been covered up. This can't be a coincidence, Clara murmured, feeling a wave of nausea wash over her. He's been doing this for years, and no one has stopped him. Anna nodded, her hands trembling as she held the remaining papers. I didn't know what to do with this information. I'm terrified, Clara. If he finds out I have these. Clara put a comforting hand on Anna's shoulder. You did a right thing bringing this to me. We'll use this to make sure he never hurts another child. They agreed to make copies of the documents, careful to keep the originals hidden. Clara felt a renewed sense of urgency. Lucas's life depended on them, and they were finally gathering the pieces needed to expose Dr. Weaver. But she knew they would have to act quickly and carefully, as the risk was higher now than ever. As they worked, a chilling thought crossed her mind. If Dr. Weaver realized they were onto him, he would do anything to protect himself. She looked at Anna, who seemed to be thinking the same thing, her face tense with fear. Let's keep this between us, Clara said, her voice firm. We don't know who else might be involved. Anna nodded, her expression resolute. They shared a moment of silent understanding. They were in this together, and there was no turning back. The following night, Clara's urgency drove her to take even greater risks. She and Anna had gathered as much documentation as they could find on Lucas's case and Dr. Weaver's history. The more they discovered, the clearer it became that Dr. Weaver was hiding a dangerous secret. But the thought of exposing him while he still held influence in the hospital was daunting, especially since they were running out of time. Lucas's condition had continued to worsen, and Clara knew he couldn't endure much more without intervention. As she checked on him that night, his breathing was shallow, his skin cool and pale. Clara felt a pang of fear every time she looked at him. She had to act soon, or it might be too late. Anna approached her during their break, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Clara, I think we need to go to someone higher up with this, she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Lucas can't wait much longer. If he deteriorates any more. Clara nodded, feeling the weight of her friend's words. I agree, but Dr. Weaver has friends in high places. We need to be careful who we trust. Anna nodded, looking anxious but resolute. Together, they made a plan. They would approach the hospital's chief administrator, someone who is known for their integrity, and present their findings. But they would need to do it quickly and carefully, ensuring that Dr. Weaver wouldn't catch wind of their plan before they had a chance to present their evidence. That night, as Clara made her way to the administrator's office, her heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. She knew that if Dr. Weaver found out before they could present their case, he could sabotage their efforts, or worse, retaliate against them. As they reached the administrator's office, Clara's hand shook as she knocked on the door. After a tense moment, the door opened, and the administrator's kind but tired face appeared. Clara explained that they had something urgent to discuss, and the administrator invited them in, listening attentively as they recounted the details of Lucas's condition and Dr. Weaver's history. When they finished, the administrator leaned back, a frown of concern etched deep into their features. These are serious allegations, they said, looking at Clara and Anna with a mixture of skepticism and worry. If what you're saying is true, then we'll need more than just records. We'll need undeniable proof. Clara's heart sank, but she nodded, understanding the administrator's position. She and Anna had done everything they could to gather evidence, but it seemed they still needed a concrete, irrefutable link. We'll find it, Clara promised. But please, just keep an eye on Dr. Weaver in the meantime. The administrator nodded, agreeing to quietly monitor the situation. But as Clara and Anna left the office, Clara knew they were racing against time. They needed one more piece of evidence, something that would make Dr. Weaver's misconduct undeniable. The next evening, Clara arrived at the hospital with a sense of foreboding that hung over her like a dark cloud. She hoped the administrator was taking their allegations seriously, but she felt uneasy. Dr. Weaver's influence was pervasive, and there was always the chance he would catch on to their suspicions. As she entered the pediatric wing, she noticed several of her colleagues giving her strange, sidelong glances. Her stomach twisted. Had word of her accusations reached them? She hadn't told anyone beyond Anna and the administrator, but rumors spread quickly in places like St. Vincent's. Her suspicions were confirmed when her supervisor approached her with a grim expression. "Clara, I need to speak with you in my office." The room felt cold as Clara followed her supervisor down the hall. She could feel her heart pounding, every step echoing her growing anxiety. When they reached the office, her supervisor closed the door and took a seat across from her, his gaze severe. "I've received a report from Dr. Weaver," he began, his tone cold and formal. "He claims you've been mishandling patient records and questioning his medical judgment. He's concerned about your conduct and has recommended disciplinary action." Clara felt her pulse spike as her worst fears began to unfold. She tried to keep her voice steady. "This isn't about mishandling records. I was trying to ensure patient safety." Her supervisor's expression didn't change. "Dr. Weaver is a respected physician, Clara. He's been here for years and has a flawless record. He's also submitted a formal complaint suggesting you've overstepped your bounds." Clara's mind raced, but she kept her gaze steady. "This isn't about overstepping. Dr. Weaver has been endangering patients, and I have evidence of his malpractice." Her supervisor sighed, as if he were dealing with a misguided child. "If you have concerns, you should go through the proper channels. But I suggest you take some time off to consider your actions." Clara's chest tightened. Time off meant being removed from a hospital, unable to monitor Lucas's condition or protect him from Dr. Weaver's influence. She glanced down, her hands clenched in frustration. It was clear Dr. Weaver was trying to silence her by discrediting her, isolating her from the very place she needed to be. The conversation ended with her supervisor's thinly veiled warning, "Stay away or face the consequences." As she left the office, Clara felt a sense of betrayal deeper than any she'd ever known. Dr. Weaver's actions had crossed a line, and he was willing to go to any lengths to protect himself, even if it meant putting innocent lives at risk. Back in the corridor, she found Anna waiting, her face pale and filled with concern. Clara relayed the conversation, and Anna's expression turned to one of horror. "He's trying to get you out of the way," Anna whispered, her voice trembling. "If he succeeds, Lucas." Clara swallowed, her resolve hardening. "I know. We can't let him win. We'll find a way to expose him, no matter what it takes." Anna nodded, though fear lingered in her gaze. They both understood the risks, but Clara knew that they couldn't turn back now. Dr. Weaver had crossed a line, and she wouldn't rest until she saw justice served. The weight of Dr. Weaver's betrayal settled heavily on Clara's shoulders. As she walked through the quiet corridors, she felt like a ghost in the very place she dedicated herself to. Every corner seemed darker, every look from her colleagues more distant. Her dismissal was looming over her, and yet her only thoughts were of Lucas, lying helpless under Dr. Weaver's care. Desperation clawed at her. Clara knew she had only one option left: to catch Dr. Weaver in the act of manipulating the medication. She would need clear, undeniable evidence to prove what he was doing to Lucas. Later that night, Clara and Anna met in the break room, where they quickly devised a plan. They knew it was risky, but with no other options, they would have to rely on Clara's knowledge of the medication room schedule. They'd hide a small recording device in the pharmacy, hoping it would capture any suspicious activity. "Are you sure about this?" Anna whispered, eyes wide with worry. "If we're caught, it'll be more than just our jobs on the line." Clara took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. "If we don't do this, Lucas might not make it. We owe it to him and every other child Dr. Weaver has endangered." Anna nodded, and the two set their plan into motion. They chose a small, discreet recording device, easy to hide among the pharmacy's shelves, and Clara carefully positioned it where it would capture anyone handling Lucas's medication. Her heart pounded as they left the room, praying no one would notice the device. The following night, Clara checked in on Lucas again. He seemed even weaker, his breathing faint, and his skin cold to the touch. She clenched her fists, feeling the anger and helplessness well up inside her. She had to believe their plan would work, that this would be the last night he suffered at Dr. Weaver's hands. Just before her shift ended, Clara and Anna retrieved the recording device. They watched the footage together in a secluded room, barely breathing as the scenes played out. At first, it showed only routine activity, but then they saw him, Dr. Weaver, moving through the pharmacy with practiced ease, taking Lucas's chart and altering the dosage yet again. Anna gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as Dr. Weaver adjusted the medication, replacing it with something else entirely. He didn't hesitate, his movements quick and methodical, as if he'd done it countless times before. The footage was undeniable proof of his actions. Clara's hands shook as she stopped the recording, relief flooding through her veins. They finally had what they needed. With the evidence secured, Clara and Anna knew they couldn't waste a moment. They had to go back to the administrator and present their findings. But they also knew Dr. Weaver's influence was powerful. If they weren't careful, he could still try to twist things in his favor. They planned the confrontation carefully, knowing that this might be their last chance to stop him. They would go directly to the administrator, present the footage, and demand immediate action. Anna's hands trembled as she slipped the recording device into her bag, and Clara gave her a reassuring nod. The administrator's office was quiet when they arrived, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows over the walls. The administrator looked up, a hint of surprise crossing their face as Clara and Anna entered, but they quickly motioned for them to sit. "We have proof, sir," Clara began, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Proof that Dr. Weaver has been tampering with Lucas's medication and endangering his life." She carefully set the recording device on the desk, pressing play. The footage was clear and damning. Dr. Weaver's every movement visible, his actions unambiguous. As the administrator watched, their expression shifted from confusion to horror. This is serious," the administrator murmured, leaning back in their chair. "You understand the implications of this, don't you?" Clara nodded. "Yes, I do. But we can't let him harm another patient." The administrator's gaze softened, a touch of admiration visible behind the worry. "You did the right thing, both of you. I'll take this directly to the board, and we'll ensure Dr. Weaver is suspended pending an investigation." A wave of relief washed over Clara, and she glanced at Anna, who managed a small, relieved smile. But as they left the office, Clara's mind was still racing. Even with Dr. Weaver under investigation, she knew he wouldn't go down quietly. He would fight back, and she had to be prepared for whatever he might throw at them. Back in the hallway, Clara felt a surge of determination. They'd done everything they could, but she knew the battle wasn't over yet. She would stay vigilant, watching over Lucas until she was certain he was safe. As they walked away from the administrator's office, Clara and Anna shared a look of shared resilience. They'd come this far, and no matter what Dr. Weaver tried next, they were ready. The next day, Clara entered the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. She felt like a weight had been lifted now that they had undeniable proof of Dr. Weaver's actions. But she knew that they weren't out of danger yet. Dr. Weaver was a powerful figure in the hospital, and if he caught on before the board acted, he could still find a way to retaliate. As she moved through her rounds, Clara noticed a tension in the air. Some staff members seemed to avoid her gaze, and a few exchanged whispered words as she passed. Her pulse quickened. Had the news of their report reached Dr. Weaver already? She spotted Anna in the hallway, her face tight with anxiety. "Clara, have you seen Dr. Weaver?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I overheard some nurses talking. They said he's been called into an emergency meeting with the board." Clara's heart pounded. "That's it then. They're confronting him. I hope it's enough to make him back down." They shared a tense look before Clara returned to her duties. Her nerves were on edge, and every minute felt like an eternity as she waited for news. Finally, as she was checking Lucas's vitals, she heard a commotion in the hallway. She hurried outside, catching sight of Dr. Weaver striding down the corridor, his expression cold and furious. The board members trailed behind him, their faces grim. For a moment, Dr. Weaver's gaze locked onto Clara's. His eyes were filled with a hatred so intense that it sent a chill down her spine. She didn't back down, holding his gaze steadily, refusing to let him see her fear. The board members ushered him away, and Clara heard snippets of their conversation, mentioning suspension and a pending investigation. As he disappeared from view, Clara allowed herself a small sigh of relief. They had done it. Dr. Weaver was finally being held accountable, but her relief was short-lived. Moments later, her supervisor approached her, his expression serious. "Clara, the board has decided that Dr. Weaver will be suspended while the investigation is underway. However, they've requested that you and Anna prepare a full report on everything you witnessed," he said. "And you should know that Dr. Weaver is denying everything. He's claiming the recording was manipulated." Clara felt a jolt of anger and frustration. Of course, he would try to twist the story to his advantage. But she reminded herself that the evidence was solid, and with her and Anna's testimonies, he wouldn't be able to escape the truth. Over the next few hours, Clara and Anna prepared their reports, recounting every detail of Lucas's case, every irregularity, and every suspicious action they had witnessed from Dr. Weaver. They submitted their statements to the board, confident that their accounts would reinforce the evidence from the recording. As the day ended, Clara returned to Lucas's room one last time. With Dr. Weaver suspended, she could finally breathe a bit easier, knowing Lucas was safe. She gently touched his hand, promising silently that she would continue to protect him and see this through to the end. That night, Clara had trouble sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see Dr. Weaver's furious expression, his cold, calculating gaze that seemed to promise retaliation. She knew she had made a powerful enemy, and even though he was suspended, she couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't finished yet. The following day, Clara returned to the hospital, trying to focus on her duties. As she made her rounds, she noticed several strange occurrences. A colleague's sudden coldness, a few critical supplies missing from her cart, and one of her patients' charts mysteriously altered. It felt like someone was trying to sabotage her work, perhaps to paint her as incompetent. Her suspicions were confirmed later that day when Anna approached her, looking pale and frightened. "Clara, I think Dr. Weaver is trying to frame you. I overheard some nurses talking. They said he's spreading rumors that you've been mishandling patients." Clara clenched her fists, anger boiling up inside her. Dr. Weaver might have been suspended, but he still had allies in the hospital willing to do his bidding. "Then we need to stay vigilant. If he's trying to make me look unstable, we'll have to be extra careful with everything we do." As the hours passed, Clara noticed more subtle signs of sabotage. A critical dosage was suddenly misplaced, notes were missing from her files, and even her badge access to certain areas had been restricted. It was clear that someone was actively working against her, trying to ruin her credibility. Then, just before her shift ended, Clara received a phone call from an unknown number. She hesitated before answering, feeling a sense of dread wash over her. The voice on the other end was unmistakable, Dr. Weaver. "Clara," he said, his tone smooth yet menacing. "I thought you were smarter than this. Going up against me was a mistake, but it's not too late. If you retract your statement, I might be willing to forget all this ever happened." Clara's hand shook as she held the phone. She forced herself to respond, keeping her voice steady. "I'm not backing down, Dr. Weaver. You harmed too many innocent patients, and I won't let you continue." There was a pause, and then his tone hardened. "Then be prepared to lose everything." The line went dead, leaving Clara with a sense of dread that settled deep in her stomach. She had expected resistance, but Dr. Weaver's threat made it clear he was willing to destroy her to protect himself. Shaken but undeterred, Clara knew she couldn't let him win. She immediately informed Anna, who agreed to help her take extra precautions, documenting every action they took to protect themselves against further sabotage. They both understood the risk, but Clara's resolve only strengthened. Dr. Weaver had tried to intimidate her, but his actions only fueled her determination to bring him to justice. They shared a determined look, knowing they were in for a difficult fight. But together, they were prepared to face whatever came next refusing to let Dr. Weaver's threats sway them from doing what was right. The hospital seemed to hold its breath as Dr. Weaver's suspension loomed over the staff. Tension simmered in the air, and Clara felt every glance, every whisper, aware that rumors were swirling about her role in the ordeal. But she knew that staying quiet wouldn't solve anything. To turn the tables, she had to shift the narrative and ensure that the truth about Dr. Weaver's actions became undeniable to everyone involved. Clara and Anna met during their break, carefully documenting each instance of sabotage they had faced in recent days. Every misplaced file, altered dosage, and slanderous rumor, each item formed part of a larger puzzle they were determined to piece together. The evidence they gathered painted a disturbing picture, one that highlighted how far Dr. Weaver was willing to go to protect himself. As the day went on, Clara approached a few trusted colleagues, quietly sharing her side of the story. She explained the mounting evidence against Dr. Weaver and the risks she and Anna had taken to protect Lucas. To her relief, some of them listened intently, their expressions shifting from doubt to shock. "I knew there was something off about him," one nurse muttered after hearing Clara's story. "But he was always so careful, so polished." Clara nodded. "Exactly. He's been able to manipulate people's trust for years. But now we finally have proof." Slowly, a few more staff members began to rally around her, quietly offering support and vowing to help however they could. Their silent alliance provided a surge of hope, reminding Clara that she wasn't alone in this battle. With her allies by her side, she felt stronger, more confident, knowing that Dr. Weaver's grip on the hospital was starting to weaken. As night fell, Clara and Anna decided to confront Dr. Weaver one final time, but this time with backup. They arranged for their new allies to be present, hoping their collective testimony would add weight to the evidence. In the near-empty hospital hallway, they found Dr. Weaver, his face twisted in anger when he noticed the group approaching. He tried to maintain his usual air of calm confidence, but Clara could see the cracks beginning to show. "You think you can win this?" he sneered, his voice low and menacing. "I've been here far longer than any of you." Clara stepped forward, her gaze steady. "Your time is up, Dr. Weaver. You can't hide behind your reputation any longer. We have proof of everything you've done." The group stood in solidarity, each person's presence a testament to the truth. Dr. Weaver's smug expression faltered as he realized the support Clara had garnered. For the first time, she saw true fear in his eyes. But Clara knew this confrontation was only the beginning. There was one last hurdle to overcome to secure justice for Lucas and every patient Dr. Weaver had harmed. With Dr. Weaver's suspension made permanent, the hospital administration wasted no time initiating a full-scale investigation. Clara's relief was tempered with a heavy heart as she continued her rounds, checking on Lucas and the other patients. She knew Dr. Weaver's actions had left scars on more than just his immediate victims. In the days following his removal, Lucas's condition began to improve under the new treatment regimen. His color slowly returned, and he even started responding to sounds around him, signs of hope that brought Clara immense relief. She checked on him every chance she got, whispering words of encouragement and offering a gentle touch whenever he stirred. One evening, as she sat beside him, Lucas's eyes fluttered open for the first time in days. He seemed disoriented, his unseeing gaze turning toward her voice. Clara's heart swelled as she took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You're safe now, Lucas," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to worry anymore. We're here for you." Though he couldn't see her, Clara felt that he understood. A faint smile appeared on his face, and he squeezed her hand in return. She knew that Lucas's recovery would take time, but this small moment felt like a victory, a sign that he could begin to heal from the ordeal. As she left his room, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of closure. Lucas's survival and recovery were the best outcome she could have hoped for, a testament to the courage and perseverance it had taken to protect him. The hospital administration sent an official notice acknowledging her efforts, and Clara received a discreet but heartfelt thank you from several board members. It wasn't public recognition, but it was enough for her. Her purpose had always been to protect her patients, not to seek praise. Back in the nurse's lounge, Anna joined her, a warm smile lighting her face. "You did it, Clara," she said softly. "We all did." Clara smiled, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. "We did what we had to do. For Lucas and everyone else Dr. Weaver hurt, it was worth every risk." They shared a quiet moment, knowing they had changed the course of many lives. For Clara, this experience had been a reminder of her duty and her strength. She was ready to move forward, carrying the lessons she had learned, knowing she would continue to protect and care for her patients with renewed dedication. The days following Dr. Weaver's removal were both a relief and a period of adjustment for Clara. The hospital atmosphere gradually shifted as news of the investigation spread, and the tension that had once filled the corridors began to dissipate. Staff members seemed lighter, as though a dark shadow had been lifted. For Clara, it was a bittersweet victory. She had exposed the truth, but the battle had taken its toll. During her next few shifts, several colleagues approached her, offering quiet words of support and gratitude. They had all heard whispers of her bravery in standing up against Dr. Weaver. Some of them even shared their own stories, times when they'd noticed something odd in his methods but hadn't had the courage to speak out. Clara listened, nodding in understanding, grateful for their newfound openness. One afternoon, the hospital's chief administrator called Clara into their office. As she entered, she noticed a warmth in their expression that hadn't been there before. "Clara," the administrator began, "I wanted to personally thank you for your dedication. You've shown remarkable courage, and because of your actions, our hospital is a safer place for our patients. You've inspired change here." Clara nodded, feeling a swell of pride. She was about to leave when the administrator stopped her. "And one more thing. We've decided to review all cases where Dr. Weaver was involved over the years. It may take time, but we're committed to finding justice for every patient affected." The words filled Clara with hope. She realized that her actions had sparked something bigger than just protecting Lucas. They had ignited a movement toward greater accountability within the hospital. As she returned to her rounds, Clara thought about the patients she had cared for over the years and the reason she had become a nurse. She wanted to be a protector, an advocate for those who couldn't defend themselves. She had achieved that with Lucas, and now she knew that her actions would resonate far beyond a single case. Later, she found Anna waiting for her in the break room, a thoughtful look on her face. "Can you believe it?" Anna asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "Because of you, they're reopening every case. It's like a whole new chapter." Clara smiled back, grateful for Anna's friendship and support. "We did it together. I couldn't have done any of this without you." They shared a quiet moment, both realizing that they had been part of something transformative. Their journey had been difficult, but the outcome was more than they could have hoped for. With Dr. Weaver's departure and the hospital's commitment to reform, Clara felt a sense of closure. But as weeks passed, she found herself considering a new path, one where she could bring her experience and dedication to a place where her voice would never be silenced. One evening, as she finished her shift, Clara received a call from a neighboring hospital. They had heard about her actions, her strength, and her advocacy for patient safety, and they wanted to offer her a position as the head nurse in their pediatric ward. Clara's heart pounded at the offer. It was an opportunity to create change on an even larger scale, to lead a team, and ensure that every child in her care would receive the best treatment possible. After thoughtful consideration, Clara accepted the position, knowing it was the right step forward. Her decision was met with bittersweet goodbyes at St. Vincent's. Colleagues, friends, and even patients expressed their gratitude for her compassion and bravery. As she left the hospital for the last time, Clara felt a sense of accomplishment, proud of the legacy she was leaving behind. On her first day at the new hospital, Clara took a deep breath as she entered the pediatric wing. The familiar sounds and sights filled her with excitement and purpose. This was a new chapter, a chance to make an even greater impact. As she introduced herself to her new team, she felt their respect and enthusiasm. They looked to her as a leader, someone they could trust to guide them through difficult situations and advocate for their patients. Clara knew she would bring everything she had learned to this new role, ensuring that her voice, and the voices of those in her care, would always be heard. That night, as she looked over the children sleeping peacefully in the ward, Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her journey had been painful and challenging, but it had led her here, to a place where she could truly make a difference. She realized that her story, and the story of Lucas, would continue to inspire her every day. And for the first time in a long while, Clara felt a profound peace settle within her. She was exactly where she needed to be, ready to start anew with strength, courage, and hope for the future. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It really helps us keep bringing you more captivating stories. We'd love to hear from you. What moment had the most impact on you? Was it a particular twist, a character's decision, or an intense confrontation? Let us know in the comments. And if you have ideas for future stories, we're all ears. Leave your suggestions for stories you'd like to see on the channel. Whether it's mystery, drama, suspense, or something totally different, your input helps us create the stories you want to watch. Thanks for being part of our story community, and see you in the next episode.